Okay, it looks like we've got it broadcasting this time around. Can everybody see my screen? Folks logging back in again, I apologize for that. I'm just going to stand by for a second. Okay, great, Diane, thanks. All right, let's go ahead and kick it off, guys. What we're going to cover first, and this section I call the how-to section. And in Commander, typically, if you're going to use Commander, there's a number of things that, of course, you can set up. And this ranges from, things like tax codes, discount codes, shop fee rules, adding a logo, selecting a form type, setting up users and permissions, customizing screens, GL accounts, things like that. So I'm going to move fairly quickly through each one of those and spend a few minutes on each one. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, you will be able to request a copy of this training by emailing support@micsystems.com and just ask for the training session from March 14th. And let's go ahead and get started. So let's assume that you just received Commander, you're logging in, and of course you're trying to figure out navigation of the program. One of the first things that I remember setting up in the beginning was a navigation bar on the side here under your Favorites tab. And so I typically start out by just pointing out that this little menu on the Favorites tab on the side, and there's a number of little drop-down menus here, as you can see, for different things in the program. But there's a Favorites menu, and the Favorites menu can be populated with the icons for each user. It's customizable by user. So each user that is going to run Commander can customize their own Favorites menu. And the way you do that is Commander, as you navigate into different sections of the program, let's say I click on Customers, for example, which if I didn't have it under my Favorites bar, I might have to go here, Maintain Contacts and Customers. But as soon as I click on Customers, I'm going to have a Customers tab that opens up at the top here. And I'm also going to be able to go to my Favorites tab up here, and it works as a toggle. I can add and remove the customers from the Favorites bar. So that particular customer icon, if I hit Remove, it's going to remove that. And then, of course, if I hit Add again, it's going to add it back, but of course it'll add it back in the bottom. So you can actually customize your Favorites bar on the side here by user. Makes it really easy for each user of the program. Everybody that's going to use Commander can have their own menu, and it helps them navigate to the sections of the program that they use on a daily basis. So feel free to go ahead and add and remove icons from that by user for each user. That's one of the first things we'd want to do when we're getting set up. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to be able to customize each user's screen. So all of the screens in Commander, as you begin to use the software, you're going to notice if I go into Units, for example, this is where our serialized units are. I can right mouse click and go to Customize Current View, and I'm going to be able to customize my screens by adding or removing different fields. The fields that are on the right are the fields that are displayed on the screen. The fields on the left, of course, are the ones that are available to be added to the grid. So everything you're seeing in the grid here is listed here in my Customize tab, and I can add and remove fields at will here in terms of what I want to see on the screen. One thing I will caution you is not to remove the status field here. There's one that says status, because if I do remove that, you're going to notice that I have these Commander uses statuses for all your serialized inventory, and those would include things like whether they're a stocked unit, a customer unit. And if I do remove the status field, it also removes those statuses at the top there, and they disappear, and I don't have use of those statuses. So with the exception of the status field, I would encourage you guys to customize your grids, both in the units screen. You can do it in your items screen. If we go to parts, we can click on our parts items, and of course, any supplier that we're looking at here, we can right-click, customize our view. Same thing here. If we don't want to see the cost column, we could remove it, or if we wanted the bin location, for example, we could add it and then position it where we want it on the screen. So in this case, I'll put my bin location between the on-hand and the on-order, and I'll have a column appear here for bin location. So again, you can customize your screens if you have additional pricing levels, because as you know, Commander has multiple pricing levels. It has a cost price, a list price, which is the suggested selling price, and then your selling price and 9 other price points, which we'll get into a little bit later. But you can display those if you want to by right mouse clicking, customizing your view, and introducing an additional price point onto the screen if you elect to. And then I'll have an additional column of pricing here, which might be a calculated value, maybe cost plus 10 or retail less a percentage or whatever. So this is the way that we customize these screens. So first we do our favorites bar, then we customize our screens. Each user, of course, that uses the program, when you first log in, you're going to notice that Commander prompts you for a username and a password. Now, there's also something here to pay attention to, and that's the fact that there is a line that you don't see when you're logging in, and that is a server line. And the server line is the line that directs the workstation to the server. So if I hit on the button that says Change Server, that's going to display the server line here at the bottom. Now, each user, as I mentioned, has a username and a password that can get set up, and I'm going to show you where to do that in just a minute, and then the server line down here below. Now, if you're running on one computer and you are the server, in other words, you've got one computer and you're the workstation and the server, you're a client server, so to speak, the only thing that really needs to go into this line is the word localhost. So if you put in the word localhost, you'll be able to log in, and the system will log in just fine. That's if you're on the main computer. If you are not on the main computer, what that line effectively is asking you is asking you, where do you want this client to connect to in the network? And we often get calls from folks that have workstations that become disconnected from their local network, and all of a sudden they call in a panic because what they see is these three lines, and the lines are all blank, so they will have nothing in them. And so then, of course, the computer can't connect. So if you're on one of the workstations and you're connecting to the server, the workstation's basically asking you, hey, which computer do you want to connect to in the network? Where do you want me to go? And at that point, you would have to know the name of the server that you're connecting to, or the IP address of the server if the server name did not work. Now, typically, that's already been entered and set up for you when we set up the program. But let's say you're running on a wireless network, and for some reason, the router, resets or something happens. You might see this, and you can save yourself a lot of pain and aggravation if you know the name of your server. You'll be able to enter it into that field. In my case, localhost. But in your case, it might be server if your main server is called server or whatever you've called it. Every computer has a name. And if you don't know the name of the computer, all you have to do is ask it. And on a Windows 10 computer, we do that by typing in the word PC name. So we're just asking it to view its name, and we can open it up. And in the case of my computer here, it's Sales1-PC. That's the device name. So if I was the server, and I was acting as a server for other computers that were connecting to me, they would need to put in exactly the way it appears with the dash and the uppercase PC, Sales1-PC. That's what they would put into the server name. So take a minute if you're running on multiple workstations to become familiar with your network to the point where you know that the names of your devices, and you'll save yourself having to call out here for tech support when a workstation can't connect. So that covers just kind of the basic logging in with usernames. Now, each employee that you have in the system gets added to the system. So whether that's a sales employee or whether it's a technician, we're going to want to put them into Commander, and then we're going to, in addition to that, create a user login and password for them. Now, to put them in just basically as an employee, so you can put them on a sales invoice, track what they sold, put a technician on a work order, keep track of the labor hours, and so forth, we're going to want to add them. And to do that, we go to Maintain Contacts, which is sliding down one and then sliding across to where it says Employees. So you can see that's kind of 3 levels back: Maintain, Contacts, and Employees. Now, if for some reason you wanted that on your favorites bar because you didn't want to go 3 levels back to get to the employees, all you'd have to do is click on favorites. And then because that tab is the one that's open, you could add that. And now I've got an employee icon down in the bottom left of the screen. So you can see how that works. If I go back there, it removes it. So it's an add or remove based on whether or not it's already in my favorites bar. All right, everything in Commander, when we're adding something new, we're going to have a new button in the top left-hand corner. That's the first place you're going to find it. So this little Windows icon up here for new, you're going to see it everywhere. You're going to see it when you go to units. You're going to see it when you go to invoices, work orders, all over the program. You're going to see this new icon. So that's one of the places you can click when you're going to add something new. So I could click up there in the top left and say, okay, I want to add a new employee. There's a shortcut, however, in the program, and that is simply to do a right mouse click. And if you do a right mouse click, you'll see the new option there. So it just saves you a little bit of wrist movement, I guess, but that works everywhere in the program too when you're adding a part, starting a new work order, starting a new invoice, or whatever the case might be. And this is where we go ahead and we enter our employees. The employee number is auto-assigned. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to assign it a number, you can, the employee a number. But essentially, all you're doing is you're going in here and you're putting in the technicians. Maybe you're putting in the technician name. The technicians can have a classification if you want them to be assigned to a department or whatever. You can create classifications for them if you want to. That's optional. And then put in their phone number and their name. That's basically all you really need in there. On the Details tab, down here at the bottom, Details, there's an additional feature for the technicians. So if you're adding a technician, and don't worry too much about all these fields that reference payroll and overtime and all of that. We're not doing any payroll currently or tracking any of the stuff in Commander currently. So what we're going to pay attention here to, you can put in the base pay rate if you wanted to, or their labor rate. But what I want to draw your attention to here is the fact that there's a color that you can assign to each technician, and that's the color that it'll use on the technician calendar. So when you're scheduling labor for that particular technician, you can have each technician display in a different color, and that's where it does that when you're setting up your employees for the first time. Now, in addition to putting your employees in here, adding them to the system, you also have the option to go into the security of the program. So we can go here, maintain security, and we can go into the security of Commander by clicking on the little tools button here. There's a plus sign to the left of it here, and we can then right underneath that click on users. And in here, this is where we add new users to the system. So if each employee was going to have their own user login and password, there's that new icon again. We would click on new, and we would be able to add employees, putting in their name, username, and password, and so forth. The user ID field that you see here, I'm just going to put some X's into it here. This is the code that you type in when you are an authorized user that is authorized to override something for another user that doesn't have permission to do something. So for example, let's say an employee that's not authorized to give a discount. They might have an authorization code box pop up, and this user ID would be different to the password, and it would give you the option to have some additional override codes that allowed you to come in and put in a user ID to possibly allow a discount or change the status of a unit from maybe a stocked unit to a customer unit or so forth. The other thing you can do here is you can pre-assign the sales rep at the user ID level. So when a user logs in, let's say my name is Steve and I log in, I don't want to have to select my name every time I go to a sales invoice, for example. So at my user level, I assign my sales rep name to my user ID, and that way when I log into the system, I don't have to select the salesman. If I go to sell something and I go into the invoicing module to sell something, right mouse click new, I can optionally force it to put in an ID, or I could preset it so that it just logged in automatically. So it would bring my sales rep my name directly to the invoice, so that we didn't have a lot of invoices that were unassigned to employees, so we know who sold what. Now, if you're sharing a login, and that's also kind of common, you'll have people that'll share a login, for example, parts 1 and parts 2, and we have a bunch of different people jumping on and jumping off. In that particular case, then you might want to set a preference, and there is a place in the preferences here where you can go maintain preferences, where you can go and you can control some of the controls that exist for selling items. So when you go to invoicing, we can control here whether or not we require an employee. So what I did is I went to tasks and then invoice and repair order here in the middle. And you'll see here's a spot where it says require an employee login to create an invoice. So if I do that, Commander is going to have that additional prompt when you go to create an invoice where the employee has to put in their ID in order to log into the invoice. Now, the reports that are created from that, if an employee is going to use the invoicing program and they're going to put in their ID, we can run a report. And one of the reports that we can run is this accounting report, which is the blue tab. And it's this report here called an employee recap report. And this is the report that gives us a summary of transactions by employee. So if I go in here and I run this for a particular starting and ending date, I'm going to get all of the transactions broken down by employee, and I'll be able to see exactly which employees have generated different amounts in terms of their volume and their profit margins and so forth. The detail tab in the reports in Commander, it's interesting. There's every report that you run, you might be surprised to learn that there's more than one report hiding behind it. It has these tabs up here in the corner: summary, detail, graph. So it has different things there in each report that you can click on to see a different view of the same data. So in this case, I clicked on the detail, which displays here. That was the detail up here in the corner. And I'm able then to see by employee what they sold, what the profit was, profit dollars, whether or not they were giving a discount or not. So if they gave a discount, I'm going to be able to see that. And of course, the profit percentage would be impacted accordingly if they were authorized to give discounts. So that's where we're setting up our employees. Now, just to kind of go back to the security section of this setting up users, each user is also assigned a permission set or a permission group, if you wish. Down here at the bottom right, you're going to see it says group, and then it says administrators here. So these are people that are set up as administrators, and of course, administrators have unrestricted access to reports and to make inventory adjustments and view the cost and so forth. There are a number of pre-allocated permission groups, and I do want to mention that each user login can only have one permission group. So don't go in here and go, well, I'm going to go ahead and then add a different permission group. That'll confuse the system because it won't know which series of permissions you're trying to apply to that user, and you'll see some errors pop up as a result of that. But you do have the ability to change. Let's say, for example, this login here of tech, I wanted to remove the administrator permissions. I could remove it, blank out that box, and then add a different permission set. There's user permissions, guest permissions. And as you become more familiar with these, the way they work is this little directory tree that you see on the left-hand side here within the permission set is basically a map of the entire program. So if I wanted to go to tasks, and let's say I went to maintain and I went to inventory, and I drilled down on inventory and items, and now I get in here and I can see, okay, well, when I get into the inventory and the items, administrators, everything is checked. They can do absolutely everything here. But if I wanted to restrict, let's say, user permissions, I don't want them to be able to view the cost or possibly edit the cost or whatever the case might be, or change the on-hand quantity unless they sell it. So I can restrict what these users can do at that permission group, and then I can assign those permission groups to different users. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to see if I can mute everybody on the call just so we don't get too much background noise here. I worked my way down the list, folks, here. I'm just attempting to mute out the call as the, there we go. All right, you should still be able to hear me, and I just muted out the background noise, and I will pause from time to time for questions here. And remember also that there's that chat box down in the bottom right. You're welcome to submit questions and just type them into the chat box if you have something that comes to mind that you want to ask. Any changes that you make at the security level will only take effect the next time that employee logs in. So you'd have to log out and log in order for that to take effect. Now, one of the things that happens is if you restrict permission to a particular module, the employee doesn't even see it. So if, for example, I click on reports, well, if I took out the permission for the reports, this little reports button wouldn't even be here. It disappears completely from that user's login, so they're not even really tempted to try and click or go to places that they shouldn't go. So that covers kind of the security and the setting up of users. Very quickly, I want to touch on a few other things here. One of them is where we set up or how to set up our sales tax codes. If those ever change, we go to the Maintain tab in the top left. We go down to Sales Tax. You'll see tax codes and tax authorities. These should have already been set up for you. Please run a transaction, double check your sales tax, make sure it's calculating correctly. Tax codes basically can be added to the system. Typically, you'll only have 2 or 3. So you'll have a non-taxable, in my case, maybe California and non-taxable. So you could have 2. I've got some others that I've used in demos. Maybe you want to set up one for resale. And the way the tax codes work is you're going to add a tax code at the top, and then you're going to add a tax authority down at the bottom. They have to have both. So NT has an associated tax authority at the bottom. California has a tax authority down at the bottom. And this gives us the ability to break a single tax rate into multiple tax authorities. So for example, if you're in a place where your sales tax has to be broken out, classic example would be some places where you have to run a sales tax report and know exactly what's payable to the city, the county, or the state, and that might be 3 separate tax authorities. So a tax rate of maybe 8 or 9% might be broken down into a 7, 2, and 1, or a 7, 1, and 1, depending on how it's calculated. Good example of that also for our Canadian dealers, they have GST and PST, which is government sales tax and provincial sales tax. And so they can add a single tax code at the top, let's call it BC for British Columbia, and then have the GST and PST associated tax codes down at the bottom. So that's the place where you go to change them. Over here on the right-hand side is where you can add tax authorities. So if you're trying to get to that, you just click on this little down drop right here, and that's going to put you in a spot where you can actually add or modify your different sales tax authorities. Go in here, either add a new one or edit an existing one and set the tax rate here. And that's how we do our tax authorities and tax codes. Discount codes we'll go to next. Discount codes, or setting up discount codes so that you can assign these to customers, is also under the Maintain tab here, and you drop down to where it says discount codes. So this gives us the ability to, it just says discounts actually. In here we can go in and set up different discounts that we might want to give on parts or labor or whatever. So if we were interested in giving a discount or setting up a discount code of some type, let's say this discount code here, I called it L3, and evidently that gives a 3% discount of all cash purchases. You could have had an L10 or whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. You can call them whatever you want. Again, the new button's in the top left, or you can right mouse click and go new. In here, you'll be able to give it a discount code, call it whatever you want. So let's say I wanted to call this L10. And then as a description, so I don't forget what I'm doing here, this is maybe the list, and then maybe less 10%. That's going to remind me what I'm doing with that discount code, and I can save it. But it's not going to work, again, unless it has an associated discount rule at the bottom. What am I actually asking this discount code to do? So if we click on this down drop here to take a look, here's one that says 10% off parts. Let's edit it and just make sure it's working correctly. We can set up these discount codes to either be applied to parts or labor. Typically, they're applied to items, which is parts. We don't like giving discounts off labor. And of course, in here, we can put in our percentage or dollar value. So if I was looking to do a 10%, discount, I would simply put in here 10, maybe 0.0, put a percent sign behind it, and then save it. And that, of course, assigns that value, add it, and now I have a 10% discount applied to my L10 tax code, and save it. And that's how we set up a discount code so that we can use it. Now, discount codes can be assigned to customers. So if we go to our customers, And we're going to talk about how to add customers and how to access this customer data. But you'll be familiar with getting into your customers here at the customer level on the Detail tab here. Besides all the obvious fields in the customer record, like the name, which is added first name, then last name. No comma, just a first name, space, then last name. Commander will identify that as first name, then last name. If you put anything in the middle, of course, it'll identify it as a middle name. That's sometimes problematic when you try and type in a husband and a wife, you know, Steve. If I were to type in and save it, it's going to identify that middle piece as well. In that case, it didn't. But it a lot of times will populate the middle name field there. So there are ways to avoid that, and programming is trying to make it a little bit easier. But sometimes, just so you know, when you're adding the name, don't add it last name, first name. It's just first name, space, last name. Phone numbers, email address, which has to be unique to each customer. You can assign a text code, of course, down here at the bottom. So these are all the obvious fields that you expect. But going back to talking about discounts, we can click on the Detail tab down here at the bottom, and that's going to give us the ability to assign a discount code to this customer. So there's our discount code. If we wanted to assign that discount code to that customer, we click in here. A lot of times we have to hit this refresh button because these grids are static based upon the last time that we opened them. And we would have the ability then to go in and select that discount code. There's my L10, and then add it to that customer and save it. Again, the Save button is in the top left-hand corner right next to the New button. And you'll notice as I hover above it, it also says I can use the function key F2 on the keyboard to save data. So that's how we assign a discount code to the customer. And of course, also assign them a special pricing level if we choose to, if he gets one of those special price points in the system. And we can also assign him a special order deposit value. Now, here we have 100% as a default, which is our system default. When you're collecting a special order or a deposit on special orders, typically we want it to be 100%, which is assigned at a system level, which I'll show you here. You go to Maintain, Preferences, and then at a system level, which is Tasks, and then Invoice or Repair Order, either one, you'll see the special order deposit is assigned here. So there's 100% there for invoicing, which is really where we do most of our special ordering. And of course, if it's in a repair order environment, we put in 100% here too. But if for some reason this customer was somebody that ordered a lot of stuff from us, a lot of parts from us, and we don't require any deposit, we could zero it out. We could put in a zero there. Or maybe we only require 50% from that customer, we could put in a 50% deposit value there. So that's going to override our store policy of collecting 100% for special orders. And it's going to give us the ability to, when we sell parts to that customer in the point of sale module, go to the checkout window, it'll only require a 50% deposit, knowing that this customer has some special terms with us, maybe some special pricing and a special discount code. All of these values that we set up, from the tax code to the deposit to the special order deposit, the discount code, are all carried to the invoice. So if I go into the invoicing module, right mouse click New to create an invoice, and then search and put that customer on my ticket, everything that I've set up for that particular customer is going to follow to the ticket. So there's his tax code, there's his discount code, and so forth. So it makes it very, very easy. Of course, if I was to special order a part for him on the invoice, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here because we haven't really gone into invoicing. But let's just go into a supplier that I have here that I don't have the part in stock, so I try to add it. It says, do you want to order it? I say, yes, I do. I go to the checkout window, and as you'll see, it's only requiring a 50% deposit. That lets me know that I've got to get $104 now and $104 on pickup. So that's what that's letting me know. And of course, I could override it. I could say, no, I don't need a deposit at all. Or maybe, yes, I do need 100% from you. So of course, you can change all that on the fly. And we'll come back to that a little bit later as we go through training here. All right, so that's at the tax code level, discount code level. The next thing I want to go into is something called shop fees. The Commander is designed and set up to collect shop fees for you, so you don't have to remember to add shop fees to each work order. So when you're setting up your system, you have a couple of choices on how to set up shop fees. How are we going to make Commander charge shop fees for us. So the first method that we had developed was a method whereby you can go into the Maintain tab here, go down to Preferences, and in the Preferences of the program, it's a task, and you go to Repair Order. You're going to see down here at the bottom of this box on the screen is a couple of presets here that you can allocate or use for whatever you want to use them for. Now, one of those is shop fees, as you can see, the second one down. And now you have a choice. I can decide, do I just want to put a flat dollar amount on each work order, in which case I would just come to the amount. I've got $15. Let's say I just wanted to put in $10, and I get a choice between making it taxable or not non-taxable. So if shop fees are non-taxable, because we don't charge tax on shop fees, we would make that NT, we'd hit apply, and now we've set up some parameters whereby every single work order that I open, when I first open it, is going to have a $10 shop fee charge added to it. And it's also at this point having an inspection fee added to it of $37. But let's say I didn't want to do that. I zero that out, and I just have my shop fee rules set up here, or at least my shop fees set up at $10. So when I go to a work order, without me remembering to do anything, I right mouse click Start a New Work Order. If I go to the checkout window, I'm going to see that I have $10 in shop fees already added to the work order. It did not tax them. And there they are. And I haven't even added any parts or labor. So this is going to help you not forget to add something for shop fees if you want to do it as a flat dollar amount. There is a shop fee button here, right here, on the checkout window. And if I click on that button, that brings up that same little box that we were just in a minute ago where we set it up. So if for some reason we wanted to override it, and we said, well, we don't really want to charge $10 on this work order, we're not going to charge anything, we zero it out. Or possibly we go back in and we say, no, 10 wasn't enough, we want to charge 15, and we can just change it on the fly, so now we have a different amount being charged for shop fees. So that was method number one for shop fees. There's a second method that we've now employed, and we've coded into Commander, and that is the ability to add shop fees as a percentage on either parts or labor. Now, it's typically added as a percentage on labor because we don't charge shop fees typically when we're just selling parts. So if we put it in as a percentage on labor for a work order, here's how we do it. We go to the Maintain tab up in the top left there, and we go down to something called Shop Fee Rules. So Maintain Shop Fee Rules, we click on that, and we have a similar type of idea here to tax codes, discount codes, and so forth. We have the shop fee rule at the top, or the code that you create for the shop fee, called the shop fee code, and then the shop fee rule is at the bottom. So here we have the code, and here we have the rule. So in order to do this, we first create a code. Again, the new button is in the top left-hand corner, or we can right mouse click and go new, and we can call this code whatever we want to. Now, I have one at the top there in the top left called Rule 3 and Rule 5, so since I don't have a Rule 4, I'm going to create one just called Rule 4. And it doesn't have to be Rule 4, it could be R4 or S4, it really doesn't matter what you call it. This is entirely up to you what you want to name them. Now, the reason I named mine Rule 3 and Rule 5 were I had set those up to charge 3% and 5% of the labor total in shop fees. So I'm going to do Rule 4, and I'm going to put in a description here so I remember what this is. It's a shop fee rule, and maybe at 4%. So that's what I've named it, and I can save it. So now I have a rule at the top here, but it's doing nothing because I've created a code at the top, but it has nothing associated with it at the bottom. So then we come down to the bottom, and we're going to go ahead and look over on the right-hand side to see how to set this up. So in here, we can click on the new button, and this is creating a brand new shop fee rule. And it gives us a choice between doing it on items, kits, labor, or units. Typically, we want to do this on labor. And we'll put in a description so we remember what this is. 4% shop fees on labor, for example. And in the value, we put in the 4%. So 4.0%. Going to go ahead and save it. Close this. And then we'll go ahead over here to the right and hit Add. And as soon as we do that, that's added that shop fee rule to that shop fee code. So now they're associated together, and you can have as many of those as you want. And so now we have one set up. Now, if I was a shop where I wanted to add 4% in shop fees based on the labor amount, so if it was a $100 labor charge, it would be $4 in shop fees. That's how that it computes. We would go to maintain, again, go down to the preferences, and just where we went before, where we went to tasks and repair order, we go into the shop fees here, and instead of using a flat dollar amount of $10, we can zero that out, and instead we want to use a rule. See the rule column here in the middle? And we could decide what rule we wanted to use as a default. So let's say we decide we're going to use Rule 4. There it is, the one we just added. Let's go ahead and put that in there, hit apply, and hit OK. And just like that, we've set up the system so that it will always add 4%. Now, if I go to a repair order and I right mouse click and I go new, and I go to the checkout window, there's not going to be any shop fees there at all. It's a 0. But as soon as we add labor, so let's say we put a customer on here, and we go to putting a line of labor on here. Now I have a labor code set up just called labor, so I can click on this little box, go to labor, find it, and add it. And my labor, as you can see, is in here at a rate of 110, but let's make it simple. Let's make it 100. And now there's my authorization code. So that was an example of a user that was not authorized. He would have to type in a code to get that particular change in the labor rate authorized. So there we go. I put in my code, and we have we've changed the rate. Now I'm going to go to the checkout window, and because we have 1 hour of labor in the system, it's adding that $4 in shop fees. That's the 4%, based on the shop fee rule of 4%, Rule 4. Let's say I wanted to see what 5% would be. Of course, we know in this case it's $5. I could choose Rule 5, and you'll see it change to $5, or I could change it to $3, Rule 3. Now, it's easy on a 1 hour charge, but let's say my labor rate was $85, and let's say I had 3.5 hours in here. So I got 3.5 hours of labor. It's a total of $297, and I go to the checkout window, and I take a look at my shop fees. It's $893, and I go to the shop fees, and I see I'm charging 3%. Okay, well, how about we just bump that up a little bit to 4%, and you see it went to $1190. So that's where it really kicks in, is really handy, because you can change it. Now, you also have the ability to override it. Even though you're using a shop fee rule, doesn't mean that you can't just go back to the shop fee rule, select a blank, which means I don't want to use a shop fee rule at all. I just want to type in the amount. I'm going to charge $15 and be done with it on this one. So I still have the flexibility to override the shop fees and go ahead and put them in there and add them to the work order. So I'm going to wrap it up. That'll be enough for shop fees. I do want to mention, however, that if you do use that feature, the shop fee rules are going to be broken out separately at the bottom of the work orders. The forms are designed with a little square, a little section down at the bottom, and the shop fee rules will be down there at the bottom in their own section. And there are some folks that say, well, I don't really like the fact that I'm drawing that much attention to the shop fees. I'd rather just add them as a line item within the body of the work order. And you do have the option to also do that. You can go to items, and you can set up in your items list, under your fees here, I have a fees folder, and I can, of course, in my fees folder, set up a shop fee of some type. Mine's just called shop supplies, but if you had one called shop fees, you could, relabel that, call it, add it, call it whatever you want to call it, and add it as a line item. And the only difference when you're adding fees versus adding items is that when you're adding an item, you go new, and now you're putting the item in. You could type in shop fees or SF for shop fees. You have to change it over here on the right where it says inventory. There's a little down drop right here. And as long as you pick this down drop, change it to fees, you're going to see the on-hand quantity, all the stuff that was right here, on hand, on order, all of this is gone now. because we don't have a stocking quantity for fees, and we don't want to have to put 9,999 in stock so that we don't get prompted every time we use it whether we want to order it or not. So when it's inventory, you have an option to add stock. When it's fees, that disappears, and that's how we add a fee item. So that's another option for doing shop fees within the work order. One of the things you can do, of course, is add your logo to the system. If you haven't already done that, there is a spot where you can go here under Maintain and Form Image Settings. And this is where you can go in and add a logo. Very, very simply, just select the image, navigate to it on your hard drive, and load it. You will notice that the JPEG file that loads has to also contain the text for your street and city, state, zip, and phone number, because it completely replaces the text that's in the system. So as soon as you decide you want to use a logo, a lot of folks will say, well, here's my logo, and they just load this top part because that's what they have for a logo, and then the other stuff isn't printing. So you do need to create a JPEG file that has both the artwork and also the street address, city, state, zip, phone number, maybe your website, email, whatever else you want to put in there. And as soon as you get it in here and you have it loaded, it's kind of a business card size. So that's the dimensions, and they don't have to be exact even though they're showing you dimensions here. As long as you more or less give or take a business card size, it's going to load just fine. And once you have it in here, you're going to want to click this button right here that says Save to All Forms, and then you can go Save and Preview. And that's going to load that logo and display it very quickly like that so you can see it loaded correctly. And now that logo is going to go ahead and print on your invoices and work orders. Now, as far as printing invoices and work orders go, you have both in the invoicing module and in the repair order module a choice between different form types in terms of what you want your forms to look like. So going to the invoicing first, this is point of sale. Again, I'll right mouse click and go new. There's a print button in the top dead center of the screen, and you can go to that print button. And in here, you're going to get a choice between the style of invoice that you want to print. First of all, the type of printer that you're using, and that is going to either be a laser printer, in which case you're going to use 8.5 by 11, that's your laser form, or receipt paper, which is the one above it there. And of course, if I change that to receipt paper, that's going to be my thermal receipt that I would print on a Star printer or an Epson printer. If I have a receipt paper selected, I only have a choice between two forms, Form 1 and Form 2. They're slightly different. You can print those and take a look at the difference between them. There's not a significant difference there. But of course, if I do choose receipt paper, and let's go to an invoice that I already have. Let's open up this invoice here. And I'll just reprint it to the screen. Here's one part being sold on a ticket. We'll go ahead and print this on receipt paper, and we'll go ahead and print it to the screen. So you're going to get the small footprint receipt like you see displayed on the screen here. That's going to be your thermal receipt. This is in point of sale only, not in the service department. Notice it's barcoded down at the bottom. That gives you a way to recall it using the scanner really effectively. You could just type in the invoice number 1958 if you wanted to recall the ticket. The other method, of course, is to use a laser printer, in which case we would select 8.5 by 11, and then we have a number of forms that we can select or choose. So let's go ahead and take a look how we get to those. We'll close out of here, go to the checkout window. On the checkout window, you're going to see two tabs. There's a payment tab and there's an options tab. So that little options tab to the right of the payment tab is going to put you into a spot where you can choose your various forms that you want to print. Same thing in the other menu. I guess you could have done it there too. But as soon as you switch over, you have these are different form templates that all do different things. You can print them, or you can use the Save As button up here in the top left, and that'll save them as a PDF so that you can look at them, see what they look like on paper, and then decide which one you want to use. A couple of things in here. There's a cash drawer option here too. And so if you do want to direct, or you have more than one station that's collecting money, so you're running multiple cash drawers, Commander handles up to 10 cash drawers currently. So let's say that we log in on we have two parts computers, left-hand side and right-hand side of the parts counter. And each one has their own cash drawer. We can select cash drawer 1 for the left-hand side computer, and when we come to the right-hand side, we can select cash drawer 2. That way, all the transactions that are generated on that particular workstation get cashed out on that drawer. So everybody has their own drawer, and the day-end reports will break everything out for you by cash drawer. So those are your options there. Just to pause for one thing here too, there's a piece of software called GreenPrint, which I'm using here in my printer setup. And GreenPrint is about $20, $19. You can download it online. This gives you a print preview option that you don't otherwise get in Commander. For some reason, we don't have a easy print preview button. You have to either save it as a PDF, which is a little cumbersome. But if you install GreenPrint like this, and I go ahead and I print the ticket like this, I'm going to get a visual representation on the screen if I choose to do that. So there's my invoice printing with that particular form and the logo printing at the top that we just loaded. And so this is if we're using a laser printer. And one of the things I do know, if this is of interest to you, one of the form types that you see here, I do know this bottom one down here at the bottom, 6NP, means no part number. So that one in particular, if you have somebody that calls you and wants an estimate or asks you to look up a bunch of parts and give them pricing, you don't have to necessarily send them something that has all the part numbers on it. You could just send them descriptions and pricing, and they could go figure it out from there themselves, and that way they don't go and shop you someplace else. So those are your form templates in the invoicing module. And the repair order module, it's really similar. Anytime you
I guess a question real quick
yeah,
regarding in the format that when I went to print, I did a crash bike just recently, and I printed out the quote, but it didn't have any of the part numbers. All it had was very brief description, or vice versa. I can't remember, right? But it didn't give me all of my part numbers. So then when it came time to get the approval and go order the parts, I had to go back into the system and go through one at a time to order. Is there a way to print out the part number on the form, or am I just missing something?
Yeah, I'm gonna go there next. We're going into work order. Thanks for the question. And Margot, hopefully I answered your question. I noticed you typed in a question earlier about how to get the logo and the address to appear, and the answer to that question was you have a choice between plain text and you have a choice between a logo. If you're going to use a logo, the JPEG file has to have the address as part of the JPEG. And I think I explained that. If you're not going to use a logo, and then I'll come back to your question, Jim. If we're not going to use a logo, then we can go into our preferences here. And again, with tasks and repair order, there's print settings that you can go to, and this is what's printing on the ticket. It's just plain text. So you get a choice between plain text or a logo, and that's how we do that. Now, Jim, to your question, when we go to the repair order module, which is where you would have created your estimate, when you go to print your work order here, you also have a choice. You don't have a choice between the thermal printer. We don't do the little slip receipt for work orders. So it's always going to be on a laser printer. And then you have a choice between these form templates that are displayed in this drop-down list. Now, if you printed something that it didn't have part numbers, you either have this form type selected, 6NP, or possibly one of these bottom work orders at the bottom here, which are really just designed to give to the technician. They have a lot of lines on them and they don't show the part numbers at all. So again, any of these work orders that you see in here, all the way from the top to the bottom, with the exception of this one, this one, this one, and this one, all print the part numbers. So just double check your form template that you're using, and that's where your issue will be in terms of the part numbers not printing on the work order. Now, if it's the other way around and you had typed in some service request detail and that didn't print, there is one of these first forms. The very, very first one, I think at the top, might not print that data. So just go in here, just change the form template. I would recommend using either 3RA, B, or C. There's 5RA forms. These are newer ones. They're a little better looking than these original forms that were designed. And so somewhere down in here, you should find a form that'll work real well for you. The other option that you have is to print the forms in a default setting or a task setting, and also to print them whether you want them in landscape or portrait or so forth. So there's quite a bit you can do as far as playing with the design and the template and the logo and all, the disclaimer at the bottom is customizable and so forth. And
I just gave it a test. 3RA worked great. Thank you.
Good. You tried it?
I just tried it. I had it on one, and for whatever reason, it's the part number or the item number, just the description printed, but not the item number. So.
Good. So we addressed your issue. That's awesome.
Yes, thanks.
Yeah, no worries. That's what we hope to do during these training sessions for sure. Now I want to make sure that everybody is unmuted for just a second, and we'll pause since we've been going for a little bit here. I'll try and make sure everybody. There we go. I'm going to pause for questions. Does anybody have any questions on what we've covered so far? And I'll give you an idea of where we're headed. We're going to take a look at GL accounts next, which is part of your setup if you like to track numbers. And then I'm going to, after that, go into, quickly how to add a customer, how to add a part, how to do an invoice, how to do a work order, how to do a purchase order, especially special ordering. That's a section of the program that folks sometimes struggle with. So we're going to cover that in the upcoming segment here. But any questions at this point? Everybody okay? All right, we're going to go ahead and move forward then. In this next segment here, I'm just going to touch on something called the chart of accounts in Commander or general ledger accounts. And most of you folks know that Commander is integrated with QuickBooks, but we do have our own general ledger or chart of accounts in Commander, and it's extremely beneficial in terms of tracking numbers, totals in different categories that you choose to track. So I have mine added to my favorites. You can see this little graph on the left-hand side here. It says chart of accounts. You probably don't have one there because you probably haven't added chart of accounts to your grid. So the way we get there is we go to maintain here at the top, go down to chart of accounts. Now, once we have the chart of accounts tab open right here, remember, we can use our favorites. We could go to favorites, and we could, in my case, remove it because it's already there. In your case, you'd be adding it, and then that icon would appear down at the bottom. So that's how we get there, first of all. Once we get to the chart of accounts, we can take a look, and there's going to be a series of GL accounts that are already in here. We usually set up some for you when you get started, but they may not be properly allocated to the way you want to track data in your system. So the reason we're setting this up is we have a report in Commander, which you can run. Under the accounting tab, which is the blue tab, is this general ledger report. And when I run my general ledger report for whatever specified date range, starting and ending date, let's say I wanted to see year to date. How are we doing so far this year? And we run it by GL account. Again, we get these little tabs up in the top. So I'm going to go across to the third one, account profitability summary. And I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit for you. And so I'm going to get some totals here, and this is going to show me how my business is doing as far as parts and service and bike sales and boat sales or whatever we have set up here. So each GL account that we have set up in the system is going to start tracking a total for us. So maybe we want to track how we're doing in Honda and Yamaha, Polaris, Mercury, Arctic Cat. Maybe we want to track our fees, or maybe we want to track our service income. Whatever the case is, these all have GL accounts assigned to them in the program. And as a result of that, I'm getting a cost, I'm getting a price, I'm getting my profit dollars in every category and how much money I'm making by GL account or category. So the way we do this is you can go into the GL account that I showed you, the chart of accounts here, and you can create GL account numbers. Now let's go down to, let's say I'm tracking part sales. Let's say I want to track Honda part sales. Or let's say BRP part sales. All right. So I set up an account 000-030. You can make this an inventory or an income account. It really doesn't matter. I mean, as far as Commander is concerned. So we could have an income account here. As a description, we call it part sales or BRP sales or BRP part sales, whatever you want to call it, and we save it. All right, now we have one in the system. Now we go across to our parts items at the item level, and we go to our BRP folder, or our BRP category, if you wish. If we had a BRP price file loaded, we would have this BRP category here. And I want to assign that particular GL account to that category of items, so that every time I sell a BRP part, it lands in that particular folder, or at least in that GL account. So I'm going to right-click on the folder. I'm going to click Open, and then I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to choose my BRP GL account. So I'll grab it right here, and I'm going to save it. So what I did by assigning it to the folder or to the category is I just assigned it to every single BRP part. I don't need to assign it at the item level. You're going to notice there's a GL account number down here at the item level too. Generally speaking, except for fees and a few other exceptions, that GL account at the item level should remain blank. There's no reason to assign a GL account to every individual item, unless you want to track it all on its own. So if you want to track, for example, oil disposal or tire disposal, or different things that like shop fees, or maybe if you're adding them as a line item, or maybe you want to track, dock fees or things like that, you can assign them their own GL account number at the item level. But generally for parts and service, things like that, we assign the general ledger account number to the category the way I showed you. In the labor section of the program, where your labor codes are, you can assign labor codes here to your various labor codes. Now, when we're talking about labor, we generally do assign the GL account to the labor code, so that gives us the ability to track labor in a variety of different accounts. Or if we wanted to, we could just assign the same GL account to all of our labor codes if we wanted to. So it's the same kind of idea, where you can just go in and assign the account at the folder level, and then you don't have to assign it to every single labor code. So long as you start setting up your labor codes like that, you start setting up your GL accounts, and you assign them to both your parts and labor, you assign them to your fees, that GL report in Commander is going to kick in, and you're going to get some great reporting in addition to what you get from the QuickBooks interface, because remember, the QuickBooks interface only posts it over for purposes of the P&L, the profit and loss. So you're going to get a P&L porting over into QuickBooks, but your full breakdown of your business at a general ledger level is going to be on the Commander side when you run that general ledger report. So that kind of concludes that particular tracking section. In this next little section here, what I want to do is move very quickly through a few how-tos in Commander, how to add a customer, for example. So we'll take that one first, and if this is repetitive for some of you folks, we'll try and not spend a lot of time on each one. But adding customers to Commander, of course, we can reverse sync your customer list from QuickBooks, but if your customer is already in there, now a new customer comes into the shop. Typically, it's going to be somebody that comes in to buy something. So we go through the sales invoicing program, right mouse click New Invoice, and then we've got two little buttons up here at the top to either search for customers or add new ones. And so if we're adding a new customer, we're going to click on the New button here, and that puts us into a screen where we can put all the customer information into the system and save it. The same holds true for the repair order module. If we are doing a work order, right mouse click New, go into the New button up here. This is where we're going to add a new customer through the work order module. If you just want to access that screen and you don't want to do it through the invoicing and you don't want to do it through the work order, you also have the customer icon, which should be on your favorites, or you can go Maintain, Contacts, Customers, and then the New button's in the top left, or right mouse click New, and you're back at that same screen. This is also where we do most of our customer maintenance. If somebody changed the phone number, or there was a change to an email address, you need to come out to the customer maintenance and change that. Coming up in version 15, which will be an upcoming release of Commander, we're going to give you more editing capabilities right from the invoice or the work order screen. Currently, if you do pick a customer, you can type additional information into the customer record. So if I go right-click New, I select my customer here to the work order, and I want to type in an additional phone number. You know, what's the best number to contact you at? Sometimes folks are wanting to see that here. We could type in a cell phone number here. And it's not going to add it to the customer record, but it certainly will keep it with this work order. So I have additional, so I can make edits here in this little box without affecting anything. You know, call after 5. It won't matter. Anything I put in here, it really doesn't matter. It's just going to be associated with that ticket. On the invoicing screen, you have also the option in the checkout window on that options tab to type additional data into the footer section down here. So if I wanted to type something in here, maybe his FedEx tracking number, you know, I could do that on that ticket. It's only going to print on that ticket, and not on anything else. Okay, so that's how we add customers. Next, we'll go to how we add parts. Now, adding parts to Commander, of course, you know, you have price files that have been added for you. So in the items section of Commander, you're going to have, typically opens up like this, and then you have to click on this little plus sign next to the categories. All the parts are loaded here in categories. And that could be a distributor, it could be an OEM, it could be fireworks, guns, whatever you sell. It could be, you know, soda. You can create your own categories in addition to the ones that we've created for you when we first set up your data set. All you have to do is right mouse click and go New Category. And if you do that, it's like creating a new folder in Windows where you can name it whatever you want to name it and start putting stuff into that folder. So you're not limited to just the categories that we've set up for you. You can create your own. Generally speaking, we use caps because it just displays better. So try and be aesthetically, you know, attentive, pay attention to how things look and keep the system looking nice and clean, just in terms of being consistent with the way you enter data. Putting in an item, of course, that's already in the system. If it's an item that already exists, of course, that's really easy. We can take the part number, type it into the little look for bar up here at the top. This is our search bar. And of course, we can either use a barcode scanner to scan it in, or we can type in the item. But as soon as we do that, that's going to pull that individual customer record up. We can put in our stock, hit the F2 key, save it, and that'll save that item as a stocking record. So that's how we put our inventory in. Adding a bin location, of course, is optional. And of course, that's how we're adding our stock or our inventory to Commander when we first get set up. We're adding our stock and bin to existing price file records. So that's how we get that done. If this was an item that was not in the price file and you had to add it for the first time, let's say I wanted to add an item to this category here, All Island. I can right mouse click on that folder and go New Item. And when I do that, it puts me in a screen where I'm just adding something that it didn't exist before. And this would be the same as any other system where you have to type in the part number. You could pick up a scanner, scan in the UPC code if you wanted to capture it. So let's say you were adding a can of Coke or something you wanted to sell, you know, shop items, candy bars, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can, apparel, great example, that we don't have a price book for, tackle, fishing tackle, whatever. You can scan these items in, type in the description, put in how many you have in stock, put in a cost price, put in your sell price. You know, so this is just the same as any other system where you're doing a lot of manual entry because there's no price book. And a lot of people ask, well, can I put my own stuff in here? You know, can I add my own items? And of course, the answer is yes. You can add those items, save them in the system, and even once you've added them, you have the ability to print a barcode label. So if we were to look up that item, we can right-click on it and print ourselves a barcode label. So Commander will create a label for it, and you can put the price on it if you wanted to price it and so forth. So it doesn't matter if it's an item that is from a price book or whether it's an item that you want to manually add. You have the ability to do both. Now, obviously, the items that you add manually, you're going to have to update the pricing yourself. So if this became, $60 cost, you would have to update it. It would also update the cost from the purchase order. That's something else Commander does. So if you're receiving it on a purchase order and it comes in at a different price, it'll automatically update your cost. So hopefully that'll make sense to you at some point as you start using the system. But all the pricing, of course, is updated manually here if it's an item you manually added. Now, if this was a price book item, but we just wanted to price this item completely differently because we buy oil in bulk, we buy it by the drum, we sell it by the quart, we had to create a part number to sell it by the quart. There's all kinds of weird scenarios that you sometimes run into. And I don't want to update this part number. Let's say, for example, the part number is in the price book, but I don't want to sell it at the price that they have it listed at. I want to sell it for less, or I want to sell it for more. I can also choose to exclude that item from price book updates. So if I check that box, I'm saying this is an item that I don't want to update through my price updates. When I load price updates from Commander, I want to maintain the pricing or maintain the description or whatever myself. So you can exclude it just by checking that little box, and that'll make that an item that does not update when you load your next price book. So that's one way of maintaining control over certain items that you want to price yourself. Now, I do want to touch on price book updates since we're talking about that, and that does probably fall into this section quite nicely. But anytime there's a price increase or a new price book for one of your suppliers, you should receive an email from us that says, hey, there's a new price book, don't forget to load it, your new Mercury file is out, or your new Parts Unlimited file, or whatever it might be. And of course, at that point, you have the responsibility of making sure that that price file gets loaded. And all things being equal, you should have on your main computer, which is your server, you should have a price file loader on your desktop. So when we go to the desktop, we should have an icon that looks like this, and we should be able to click on that icon to open up our price file loader. Now, there are two types of files. One type of file is the one that we make, and the other kind of file is the one you make. So we're able to load both using these two tabs. There's a standard tab and there's a custom tab, two different tabs in the price file loader. So standard or custom. Now, standard files are the ones that we make. So if, for example, I wanted to load a Kawasaki file, I click on Kawasaki cycle or motorcycle, and I'm going to get this button right here, check for updates. That button right there is letting me know that I can click to see if there's a new file, something newer than the one that I have. At this point, it'll create a location for it, and it's going to start downloading the file. I just stopped it, but it's going to download the file in a zipped format, so you have to wait while it downloads. Once it finishes downloading, there will be a short pause, and then it'll say validating the file. And then you're going to have a button appear down here in the bottom right of this box where you can click I accept. And all that really means is we're telling you, hey, we don't make these prices. These price files are downloaded from various suppliers. We're not responsible if for some reason there's a price that isn't accurate in the file. So that's how we update our parts and prices for you. If you do have a short line vendor, a vendor that we don't make a price file for, somebody that we don't have a price file for, you're going to load that using the custom price file tab, and you'll have to check with us. There are some price file instructions at the bottom, custom price file instructions right there. And you can click there, or we can send you some instructions on how to load custom files. The most common file loaded using this tab is the Land and Sea file for our Mercury dealers. That is a custom file. Donovan makes a custom file. And so when you contact those suppliers and they send you that price file, this is the tab that you're going to use to load that file. I'm not going to cover specifics on how that's done, but there's a very specific mapping here that you have to choose. And that's how we get these files loaded. So the first time you're updating that, you'll want to call or at least have somebody walk you through how to load one of those. There are instructions in the price file loader down at the bottom, as I pointed out, but that's how we update the parts and prices. And of course, One of the things I do want to mention here regarding price updates is that you control what happens when a price file updates. You have absolute control over which fields update, not only to exclude an item like we did here, but to control, let's say we were loading a price file for All Island. Here's my supplier. I can right mouse click on that folder and open it up. And I have something called batch rules. Batch rules are basically formulas or rules that execute in a batch, so you don't have to worry about it. But every time I load a price file, these rules execute against that pricing. So if I'm manipulating the pricing in any way, and I don't want to just load standard cost and retail pricing, I can set up a batch rule, and I can edit it, and I can get into this little grid here where I decide what I want to have happen when that price file loads. Now, common examples of this would be, maybe a supplier doesn't give you a cost price, and your cost price is reverse calculated from the retail price, and so you would have to calculate a cost price, in which case you might have a rule in here that says, okay, I need to calculate my cost, and so you would say what I'm calculating is cost, and my rule would be cost is equal to the retail price or the sell price, and they give me 30% off, so I'd multiply that by 0.7, just as an example. So you can put these little mathematical strings into the batch rules, and they will execute when you load the price file automatically. So if the retail price has changed and your cost price is 30% below retail, it'll automatically recalculate your cost. Similarly, there are some folks that don't want to update the cost price. You might want to deselect the cost button completely because you don't want that field updating. Some places have inventory appreciation and capital gains based on cost increments and so forth. So these formulas are a lot more sophisticated than what we're going to cover in the demo, or at least in the training today. We can do 99-cent rounding, we can do nickel rounding, quarter rounding. What that means is every part you sell ends in 99 cents or 25 cents or whatever the case might be. So folks like to do some interesting things with pricing. You can add percentages to your sell price based upon conditions. If the part is greater than $5, less than $10, then I want to add X percent to it, and so forth. And this is also where you set up your parameters and your formulas to calculate your special pricing. Remember, I said Commander has a sell price and 9 additional pricing levels. So if you're wholesaling parts to another dealer at cost plus 15, maybe special price 1 is cost plus 15. In which case you would go into the batch rules, set up a formula to calculate special price 1, and that would execute every time the price file loads. And so those are the important things to be aware of that exist in the program. You don't necessarily have to have a handle on how to use them from day one, but just be aware that they're there. And if you want help setting up price points or special pricing or whatever, you could email support and say, can somebody come and help me set up my pricing points or my pricing levels. You will find that Commander already has some batch rules in there. When we ship the system out, if you right mouse click and go open and go in here and look at these batch rules, we've already got a bunch of batch rules in here for doing different things, different to mine. Mine you'll say 99-cent rounding and other things. They're going to already be in here. So some of those have already been put into what we call our template data that we send out when we ship out software to you. So that's pricing, loading prices, updating price files. We mentioned adding employees and techs, and of course at the work order level, and this is a little out of order, but we talked about adding employees to work orders. Technicians get added to labor. So when we're creating a new work order and we're putting a labor line on the work order, if we do want a technician to get credit for these labor hours, we have to come down here to the bottom to assign a technician. So it's only to a labor line. Labor lines all start with the letter L, and then you're adding labor. So don't get in the habit, the very bad habit, of just clicking in here and saying this, just typing in something here. This is what we did. Got my fat fingers here. This is what we did. You can do that. Anytime you type in something and Commander does not recognize it, it'll have the letter M in the left-hand column. That means it's miscellaneous. I don't know. It's not a part. It's not labor. It's not a fee. I don't know what this is. And yes, you can use the system that way. But ideally, if you're going to track the system correctly and you want to add labor, put on labor. If you want to add a part, put on a part. Let it recognize it as an item. You'll notice the moment that I have an item that the system recognizes, it's going to tell you, hey, that's an item. And that starts with the letter I. So we'll go to All Island, we'll add an item, and you'll see here it says an I for item. So there's an L, there's an I, there's an M. If it was a fee, it would start with the letter S. And so it has these different type codes on the left-hand side that identify what the item is. But again, specifically, labor itself can have a technician assigned to it at the bottom. So we can go in here and assign a technician, Peter. Now, Peter is going to get credit for, let's say we go with 3 billable hours here. Peter gets credit for those billable hours. And we're going to come back to the work order. I just want to mention that's how we're adding our employees and technicians to different sections of the program. In this last 15 or 20 minutes here, and we're going to wrap it up, guys, I'm going to go through just the flow of the system in terms of how parts go from onto the invoice, the work order, to the PO pad and to the purchase order, because this is where people really, really get confused or tied up and then decide, well, they don't want to use the ordering system because they don't ever take the time to learn it. And it's really so simple. It's designed to make your life really, really simple. So when we go to the how to do an invoice, typically you're going to click on invoicing. You're going to get a grid of all the customers that you've sold parts to previously. Invoicing is used to sell parts. Invoicing is also used to sell units, serialized units, something with a VIN number or a serial number, boat, motor, trailer, motorcycle, whatever, mower, blower, and so forth. So when we go into the invoice, again, we click on invoicing, we get the grid. We can right mouse click and go new. We can select a customer or just allow it to default to the counter sale customer, which is just, hey, I'm not going to take your name and number and so forth. I'm just going to go ahead and sell you something. And now we can start adding parts to the ticket. The search button is right here next to the new button. So if we're searching for an existing customer, we can search there. And of course, we can search by last name, first name, company name. We've got options here for searching. So if we type in some of the customer's last name, we've got 2 Wilsons, and we can choose Craig or Paul and select the one we want. The items can get added a couple of different ways. There's an items box right here. And I'm going to tell you a couple things here that are really important to know about the way Commander searches for items. There's 2 different search mechanisms in place. So when I click into the items box, if I'm going to type in or scan in a number here, if I scanned it in, I'd be fine. Of course, it's going to be an exact match. If I type it in, it has to be an exact match. It doesn't care so much about dashes, spaces, uppercase, or lowercase, but I have to have the correct part number in order to enter it here into the items box. Anything less than the item number is not going to return a match. So let's get a good part number here from this supplier that we're using, All Island. And let's take a part number here. They have these part numbers that are OME. And then there's an SB91. So that's my part number by the look of it. So if I was to type in, of course, that number right here, OMES B91, it should find that number without any problem and put it right onto the ticket. Now, I don't have any in stock, so it's asking me if I want to special order it. And this is what's going to happen if it's an item that is it's a valid number, but you just don't have it in stock. So you're going to say yes or no here, depending on if your inventory is correct. If your inventory, if you have it in your hand, you're not going to say, yes, I want to order it, but you do get a choice. So let's say, for example, that I have it in my hand. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to order it. And there you see it puts it onto the ticket. Now, I can right mouse click and remove it. If I was to type in this number again, OMES, and I stopped, it doesn't get a match. It doesn't know what that is. It doesn't show me a list. It doesn't give me choices. It just says it's miscellaneous, and it just keeps going. There's no match. But if I click into this box, notice carefully to the right of this box is a little square right here with 3 little dots on it to the right of the box. So if we click here, you're going to get another little search box that pops open, and this search window works differently to that first one that requires an exact match. So if I typed in OMES, I'm going to get some results here. It comes up with 102 matches that all have the OMES match. If I added the letter B to it, I have 85 matches still. If I add a 9 to it, I'm down to 11 matches. And of course, if I put in my 1, then I'm down to my single item. So you can see what it's doing. It's finding that particular string of numbers. As long as it's contained within the part number, it'll find it. Now, Commander can be set to search from left to right, if that's what you like, or it can do something where it contains it. So if I have mine set, there's a feature called keyword search, and keyword search would allow me to, for example, type in an ES, right, B91, and I forgot to type in the OM in the front, and I'm still going to get, in this case, there was only one match, but it still found the item. So it's a little bit more forgiving. So depending on how you want your system to work, if you want it to work from left to right or contains, there's a place where you can turn the search feature on or off, depending on how you want to use the system. So if I go to maintain and to preferences, you're going to see under inventory that I can either enable or disable keyword search. And keyword search is the thing that makes the system search. If it's enabled, it's a contains. As long as it contains that data within the string, it'll find it. If I disable keyword search, it's going to search from left to right. And that would be a different type of search. And both of those are in play. So depending on whether you think your system's coming up with too many search results, because remember, Commander has price files loaded, you might have 1 million part numbers loaded in your system. So sometimes when you go looking for a number, you get too many results, and especially if the number's really short. I mean, the shorter the number, the more chances are that there's going to be a lot of different results. So if I typed in 9052, I might get a lot of results. Okay, I typed that in, I'm looking, and I've got over 500 results. And when I'm looking in items, it's showing me that my matches here are 500 records. Now, you can also set how many records you want to display on the grid. If you want fewer records, it speeds up the system. If you don't mind the system taking a little bit longer to display, you can increase the number of records that display in this grid. So in my case, I have my grid set to display 500 records when I scroll down. That's my search in the grid. If you want to limit it, you can go to Maintain, Preferences, and again with Inventory, you can change the number of rows that display. Now, if I change mine to 25, just as an example, when I search for this 9052 number, I'm only going to get 25 search results. It's going to go and notice it had 25 records, and in fact, the one I'm looking for isn't even there. So that can be an issue for folks when you have short part numbers. Now, there's a little bit of a trick here with SQL databases. You can actually put a quotation mark. So if I put a quote mark on either side of the part number, 9052, I'm going to ask the system then to not find anything that has 9052 somewhere in the number. And again, let me just explain that some of these numbers you're looking at and you go, well, why did it come up with this number? There's no 9052. Why did it find that? And when you go looking in some of the alternate fields, Commander loads UPC data, alternate part number. Sometimes there's an OEM or vendor part number. So somewhere within this part record is a 9052 somewhere in the string. And there it is under the OEM number. You can see there's a little piece of a 9052 right there. And that's why it's displaying this record, even though that part number doesn't have 9052 in the part number itself. It might be contained in the UPC code or somewhere else within the record that's loaded. But if I use this little quotation mark, 9052, and put quotes in it and search, it's only going to find something that has that exact match. And in this case, I have 3 vendors, Harley, Tucker, and Mercury, that all have that same part number. Obviously, I can drill down on what I'm looking for by not searching in all categories. And I could have clicked, let's say I was really looking for the Mercury part. I could have gone down to the Mercury price book and just clicked in Mercury, and it would have just found the Mercury item. So that's a good navigation trick and search tool, which is also in play when you're doing your invoicing. So when you're doing this invoice and you come in here, you don't get a match, you go to the little box here and you type in your 9052 and you pop those quotes in there, so I got the same result. So I've got that same kind of search capability to drill down on what I'm looking for because I have too many part numbers coming up the other way. So that's how we're adding parts to the work to the invoice. Once we have items added to the ticket, let's just go ahead and add a couple of parts to this invoice. And in this particular case, I'm just going to say no, I don't want to order them, special order them. I'm going to go ahead and put a customer on here, search. I'll put my name on the ticket, or let's put Paul's name on the ticket. And then we go to our checkout window up here to collect our money. In this case, I'm owed $468. That's my dollar total. And I get my payment method choices here. Now, Commander defaults to cash typically, so if the customer was paying cash, let's say they gave you $500 and I add the payment that's going to make change down here at the bottom and I can print the invoice. That's very simple. If they were paying with a check, it's recommended that you put in the check number here, so you can put in a reference number here for the check number. So you could type in pretty much anything you want, including an approval code if you're running an outside merchant company and they were paying my credit card. You could go ahead and pay this in full, and you could enter the approval code here as a reference number. For those of you that are using XCharge, we have our own integrated merchant processing, which of course uses these two payment options down here at the bottom for XCharge, credit, and debit. We enable those, and of course this is all seamless and it processes the payment directly through the checkout window. So that's kind of how we're doing the invoicing. Let's say, for example, though, that we wanted to do a special order. So we right-click, we do a new invoice. We go ahead, we put our customer on the invoice, and we go to put some parts on the ticket. Now, in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab parts that I don't have in stock, 1, 2, 3, and try and add them to the ticket, and it's going to say, you don't have these parts in stock. Do you want to order them? And I'm going to say, yes, I want to order all of them. And it puts them on a special order section of the ticket down there at the bottom. Now, I can still manipulate my discounts through my discount codes at the top if I want to. There's my discount code, which is blank in this case, which means the customer is just paying retail. I could have clicked into my discount code and got one of those discount codes, maybe that one we created earlier, to give 10% off. There's my L10, and I could have selected it, and it would apply that 10% discount to all the parts on the ticket. Notice how that 10% discount kicked in there because I chose a discount code up here at the top. So anytime you choose a discount code on the fly, it's going to add that discount to all the parts on the ticket. Now, if I didn't want to do that, and my discount code was blank or unassigned like this, let's try and blank it back out again. There we go. So now we're not giving a discount. I have the option to discount by line item. So if you look at the discount column here on the right-hand side, I can go into that prompt, and I could decide that I want to give 10%. So I put in 10 and a percent sign behind it, and that gives a 10% discount. If I didn't put the percent sign behind it, but I just put in a 10, it would be a $10 discount. So it works as both a dollar amount and a percentage, depending on how you use it, which means that you can effectively go, well, I'm going to give him 10% off this guy right here. I'm going to give him 5% off this guy right here. So I can change my discount by line item if I don't use the discount code at the top, because this is going to override whatever happened at the top. The other little thing you have going on here is if you click into the item itself like this, into the price of the item, there's a little down drop here, and you can sneak in there and take a look at what you paid for the item if you wanted to see how much margin you had to work with. You paid $164 for it, so maybe you're like the guy, you're going to not give him a discount, but you're going to sell it for $175. So there we go. Now it highlights it in yellow to let you know that somebody actually changed the price. So you can see that that was manually over. Somebody typed over the actual sale price. But those are some of the options that you have. Now, what I really want to draw your attention to here real quickly is that these parts are special order parts. So when we go to the checkout window, we collect our deposit from this customer. Let's say we wanted 100%. Customer owes us $639, and let's say they're going to pay with a credit card, and we pay this ticket. We go ahead. A lot of folks have a choice. You have a choice here. You can post it or you can invoice it. Now, if you post it, you'll be able to get back into the ticket when the customer comes in to pick up the parts and add additional items to them, to the ticket, if the customer wants to get something else. If you invoice it, you will not. So let's go ahead and just post it for now. And that'll take care of posting the money to today's date, to the day's collections for our cash drawer or our merchant statement. The ticket that prints shows us that we have received a special order deposit. So even though it was payment in full, we're not owed any money on pickup. Due on pickup is $0. Customer gets this ticket, they leave the shop, and these parts are sent to something called the PO pad. Now, the PO pad and the purchase order are what we're going to talk about in relation to the invoicing and the work order. Commander is designed to collect parts that need to be ordered on the PO pad. So I'm going to slow down and just kind of point this out. So we have 3 places that parts can come from. If we go to the orders tab at the top here, we have the PO pad. The PO pad or purchase order pad is like a digital notepad. That's all it is. It's like you have a clipboard lying on your desk, and every time you need to order parts for somebody, whether it's for a job, whether it's for a special order customer, or whether it's you discover you're low in stock, doesn't really matter what scenario. You notice parts need to be ordered, you write them down on the clipboard. That's what Commander does. It writes everything down for you on the PO pad. It does it, for example, when you closed out your special order ticket here, I can go to the PO pad now and take a look, and there those parts are. They're sitting right there on the PO pad for me, so I don't forget to order them. The information that came to the PO pad was the customer name. It's a special order part, SO, and it came from invoice number 1960. So that's what it's telling me. It's tracking all the way through the system that those are the parts that we're looking to order for that customer. So those came from an invoice. Now, another way that parts come to the PO pad is when you're low in stock. And so in order to review that feature, we're going to go back to items. And when we're looking at the item level of this particular screw, for example, let's say we had 2 in stock. And down at the bottom left, you're going to see a tab called Detail. I'll underline it here. And on the Detail tab at the item level, you can set up something called min-maxes. Min-maxes are stocking levels. This is where we say, okay, if this part ever falls below 4, we want to order back to 24, whatever. So you can determine your stocking levels for oil filters and spark plugs and items that you know you want to keep on the shelf and you don't want to run out of. So at some point in time when our stock falls below our minimum is 4. Our stock right now is 2. 2 is less than 4. So the system is going to pick that item up and let us know that we need to order to get back to our max. So it's going to try and get us back to 24. Now, it doesn't do it automatically. If we go to the PO pad now and take a look, you'll see the part's not there, refresh, not there, not there. Okay, it's not there. But when it comes time to run a stock order and it's time to actually go ahead and check and see what you're low on, and you want to place a stock order with Land and Sea or whoever you're going to place your order with, you can go to your orders tab here, generate a stock order, and you can do this based on your min-maxes. So if I hit the preview button, this is going to pick up parts that need to be ordered. And notice that very top one also picked up 2 other Land and Sea items that I was low on at the same time. So this is kind of like you walking around down every aisle and shaking the boxes to see what you're low on and trying to make a decision on what you're supposed to order. So it picks up these 3 parts and says, here's 3 items where we're suggesting that these quantities get ordered to get you back to the max. So let's say we say generate, and it'll put those on the PO pad for us. So now if we look at the PO pad is now additionally populated with these 3 additional parts that I'm highlighting here. Notice their type code in the right-hand side here says MM. MM means min-max. SO means special order. If they come from a repair order, it's going to say repair order, which is RO. So MM means min-max. Now, when I'm looking at the part, I can see that I'm down to 1. There's my stock. It's suggesting that I order 3. And it's trying to get me back to my max of 4. That's what it's trying to do. It says, hey, you're down to 1. You have your min-max set at 2 and 4, so you need 3 to get back to your max. That's what it's doing. So it hasn't ordered it yet. It's just letting me look at it. Now, before I make a decision to order 3 of this item, I have the option also to review the sales history. So down here in the bottom left is a sales history tab. So before I go ahead and just place this order, maybe it's a high dollar item, I'm going to look at the sales history first. So I go into the sales history tab. I can pick the starting and ending date range. Let's say I want to go back to the beginning of last year and I want to view it. And I notice I've only sold 2. So here we are, sitting about to order an item. We're about to order 4 of something or 3 of something. We've got 1 on the shelf, and I'll come back to you in a second, David. Sorry, I was reading David's question. So we have the ability here to, of course, make an intelligent ordering decision because we can view the sales history on an individual item. And we can do it this way and decide on the fly if we want to change our min-max maybe to 2 and 2, and we're only going to order 1, whatever the case might be. So this is the ability to use the PO pad. Now David's question is, can you only pull part of the min-max, or do you have to generate all? So let's go back and address that. Now when you run the stock order, you can filter it by the OEM. So if you're looking to filter it just by one supplier, I'm doing a land and sea order. I noticed on my PO pad, or maybe I have some ARB parts or whatever the case might be. In this case, I've got land and sea. So if I come to my PO pad and I see that I've got some parts here for Mercury or for Parts Unlimited, and I go, well, I'm about to place an order for Parts Unlimited, so maybe I should take a look and see what else I might have to order from them since I'm placing a special order. I'm doing all my special ordering for the day. I can go in here and I can run my stock order, filter it by the supplier that I want to run it for, choose that particular supplier, let's say Mercury, and then preview it, grab the parts that are just Mercury parts, and then it's going to give me. So we can only filter to the min-max, the view or pulling min-maxes based on the supplier, which makes sense. Another reason you might want to do that is at the vendor level. Now, we skipped over adding vendors in Commander, but even though you have items added and you have all these categories over here with parts suppliers, you still have to add your vendors to the system, who you buy the parts from. And the logic behind that is quite simple. If you were a Mercury dealer, you buy Mercury parts from Mercury. But if you were a Yamaha dealer, you buy Mercury parts from your friend Joe down the street, who is the local Mercury dealer, and he sells you Yamaha parts. So your vendors would be different, of course, for Mercury parts, depending on if you're a dealer or not. So in the vendor section, we add our vendors. Sorry about that, guys. All your vendors get added. I apologize for that. All your vendors get added here. You've got to go in and put in your suppliers, who you buy your parts from. One of the features for adding vendors is to set a free freight mark. So if you look on the detail tab here at the bottom of the vendor, I can set my freight amount. So in this case, I've got land and sea, and I'm telling the system that they pay the freight if I order at least $100. Now this is going to differ by vendor, so you have a different option for each vendor to set this minimum. So as we're creating our purchase orders, we're looking at our PO pad, for example, and we see we have to order some parts from land and sea or whatever the case might be. We can go to our purchase order module to create the purchase order. So again, we click on purchase orders, right mouse click new, and then we're going to have this purchase order module open up. Now, you can set it to default to your most common vendor. So I have mine set to Parts Unlimited, and they have free shipping at $100. As soon as I change it to a different vendor, the shipping minimum might be different. So in this case, Mercury pays the freight at $200. So depending on the vendor, of course, that feature is going to be in play as you use the purchase order module. And if we go to land and sea, for example, I think we had that set at 100. So there we go. At this point, we want to add items to the purchase order. Now, the purchase order is the only one that works slightly differently. There's no way to click in over here into the items box. You can't click over here and add items. We have an add items button down here at the bottom left. And the easier way to do it is just simply to right mouse click in the middle of the screen and click add items. Now, when you do that, your PO pad is going to open up, provided that you have PO pad selected here. Now, if I didn't have PO pad selected and it was on items, that would be looking at all my price book items and everything else. So what I really want to see at this point is my PO pad. So I click on PO pad, and I can see that I have a Mercury part, some land and sea parts, and 3 parts from ARB. So I've got 3 different vendors that I have to order from here. Now let's assume that you're an independent power sports dealer and you get your Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki parts all from the same place. This would be really easy because you would just highlight all those parts and then just say, well, I get them all from the same guy. So we'll just go ahead and add all those. It doesn't matter who the vendor is, right? So that would be one method of mixing and matching the suppliers, putting them on the same purchase order, and maybe you get those from World of Power Sports if that was your vendor, just as an example. Maybe you get them from another dealer. So you would click in and that would be your vendor. And immediately when we qualify for free shipping, it shows us when we've hit the free freight mark because we've got a $957 order down here at the bottom. But a good example of why we would want to utilize that stock order feature would be when we create a new order, we go to add parts, we add just land and sea, for example, we put them on there, and actually we're at free shipping already. But let's say, for example, we came up just a little bit short, and it said, you know, you have $8 to go before you qualify for free freight. Well, that wouldn't make sense to pay the freight when you could just add another oil filter to the order, and basically you got, you know, a couple of free oil filters, whatever the case might be. So that's when we save the purchase order and we don't create it. Creating it locks it and closes it. If you save it, it leaves it open so I can still come back and add other items to it. So that's how we use these 2 features. It doesn't assign it a purchase order number until you create it. As soon as I create it, it assigns it a PO number. So that's when it actually gives it a number up here. So at this point, if we were trying to, you know, if we were a little shy on the free freight, maybe we would go back to the stock order here and run a stock order and do it for land and sea, pick up some items that we were low on from our min-maxes and bring them across and put them on the order. So that's kind of how we get the PO pad is talking to the invoice, sends them to the purchase order pad, and then the PO pad, you know, we pull them to the purchase order. So those 3 are very linked together. Very important to know that if you have items on the PO pad, let's say these ARB parts here that I have here for Paul Wilson. These came from an invoice. These came from invoice number 1960. And if we want to do maintenance here, we do not delete items that come from invoices or work orders off the PO pad. So it's a bad idea. If we right-click and we try to delete it, 1960 is the document. It's going to warn you and it's going to say, listen, if you take this item off the PO pad, it's also going to delete it from that invoice. So if I go back to that invoice, instead of having 3 parts on it, I'm only going to have 2 parts on it. So we really don't want to do it here. If we have to make modifications because for some reason this customer didn't need this item, we'd want to go back to the repair order that it came from or the invoice that it came from, make the adjustments on the invoice or the work order, and then that in turn will also delete it from the PO pad. So anytime I delete an item from an invoice or a work order, it takes it off the PO pad. So let's go quickly to repair order. Right mouse click, start a new repair order. Let's go ahead and select our customer here, Craig Wilson. Come across to the right to search to see what unit he owns. And if we click on customer's unit here, this displays all the units owned by this customer. If we were adding one for the first time, we go here to Customers Unit, and we click Add New. That's going to populate or pop open with a box into which you can put all of your field preferences here. If you want to collect the VIN or serial number, all of these labels that you see here, all these field labels can be repurposed. You can label them. Right now I've got power sports settings selected, so you're seeing things like miles instead of hours. And you're seeing engine, crate, frame, and displacement instead of other fields that would be relevant if this was a marine customer. So you have the ability, just to pause and show you that, you can go into your preferences of Commander, and we can go into our inventory preferences for our units. And depending on the industry that we're in, we can select whether we're power sports or marine or whatever. And let's say, for example, I choose the fact that I'm a marine dealer. It immediately changes all those field labels to something different. And in fact, if I don't want it to say unit, but I want it to say boat, I can change that too. Boats. Apply. Okay. So now what happens when I go to the unit screen? I'm going to have different fields. You're going to see that all these field labels have changed. So even in the repair order module where we were creating that repair order just a minute ago, go to add the customer unit. Now you'll see the field labels have all changed. So it's very industry specific to the point where you can customize those fields and collect the data that you want to collect as you're adding units to the system. So this customer, Craig Wilson, actually has a Grady White, so we're going to go ahead and select that, put it on the work order, and so the boat's going to load here, customer name goes here, boat name here. Now, Commander is one of the few systems that can do this in reverse too. So if you wanted to, customer comes in and maybe you don't know who owns the boat. You right-click, start a new work order. Instead of going to look for the customer's name, you go right across to search for the unit first. And of course, you can search for it a variety of different ways. But as soon as you find that unit and you select it, it'll say, do you want to add the customer that owns it? You say yes, and it reverse loads his name. So either way, you can get the work order started, which is nice. There's a view button in the top right-hand corner, right up here. This view button is going to allow you to view the detail on that particular unit. So I'm going to go into that, open it up, and you can see the data that I've already collected, the engine numbers, and the information on this boat is displayed here. Possibly also a location if the boat was in a different spot. Maybe it's in a dock somewhere or dry storage or whatever. If that would be an address if it was different to the billing address. There's a feature here for adding pictures if you want to. There's a show picture button here. With this feature, you can click on it and you can start adding images. So you can take photographs, add them, double click to add the picture. That's how it typically comes up. Navigate out to your folder where you have the image and load it. And of course, that loads it into the system. So this is great in the sales module. It's great in the service module for you to load images if you want pictures to document something with images, damage maybe, or a repair procedure. The next step in the work order is the service requested. Up in the top here, in the top left, you have a spot to type in there. There's a free form text box for both requested services and recommendations. So if we click in there, you're going to see two sections. And you can designate whether or not you want those to print. And of course, you can type in the text here. This is typically where the customer just tells you what they need done. You type it in. Any additional recommendations you can type in here also. Now, some folks like to just use the body of the work order and just type it in here, which you can do. You can go ahead and select your labor codes from here, put them on the work order, go ahead and add your parts, put them on the work order. And we're going to move fairly quickly through this work order just to kind of wrap it up for you guys here. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab, we'll just grab anybody's parts. We'll grab some golf cart parts here and we'll put them on here. Now, anytime you're adding parts to a work order, if you don't stock them, the fill quantity is going to be 0. If the fill quantity is 0, that means you do not have them. You have the option to save the work order as a quote. upcoming release, that's actually going to be a changeable preference, so you could say estimate if you prefer the word estimate. Currently, if you want to print it as an estimate, there's a print button up here at the top, and you want the word estimate instead of quote, you click that box that says estimate, and it'll throw away the word quote and use the word estimate instead. You have an email option up here at the top if you want to email this to somebody, and it'll PDF it in background and it'll send it to them as a quotation or estimate, so they get a copy of that emailed directly to them. And obviously, if you want to get this job on the go, you've got to get these parts ordered. So there is a post button in the top left-hand corner. This is what executes the work order so that it becomes work in process and gets these parts on order. As soon as we post it, you're going to see that the work order will populate in the right-hand column with the letters SO, which means sold out or special order. And those are the parts that in turn get sent to the PO pad. That action of posting it sends those parts to the PO pad. So if we go back to the PO pad now and take a look, we're going to see these parts show up that we just put on this work order. Here they are here. It shows us that they came from a repair order, RO 1257, repair order 1257. Again, if we wanted to get those parts ordered from the vendor, we would go to purchase orders, right mouse click new, and then choose that vendor as our supplier, take the Nivell parts, add them to a purchase order, create the order, and now we have those parts on order. It'll say outstanding order. When the parts arrive, we click into the purchase order. There's a receive button up at the top. We can simply click receive, and all those parts will go into inventory. We can choose to print barcode labels if we want to down here at the bottom. We can adjust the cost if it comes in at a different price. We can choose to adjust the label count over here if we don't want labels for everything. When we hit receive, we'll have the option to enter the bill. That bill will transfer to QuickBooks. If we want to skip that and come back and do it later, we can skip it. Purchase order will say all received if everything comes in. It will say outstanding when we're waiting for the parts to come in. It'll say all new purchase order if it's one that we're creating and we haven't yet finalized. And we also have a status called partially received, which means not everything came in. So just to wrap up that work order real quickly, we'll go in. Once the parts have been received, there's a button up here in the top here. It says special order call list. This is where we can look to see which parts have come in. If we click on the special order call list for today, we'll see whose parts have come in. Okay, these Nivell parts came in for repair order 1257. So now we're going to go back to repair order 1257, open it up, and hit the update button at the top. There's an update button right here. This update button or the F5 key is going to fill the parts on the work order. So we're going to click this button here. The parts have now filled in. We're going to hit post. And now, of course, we can go ahead and assign the technician. We can schedule the technician if we want to and send it to a calendar. We need the tech for an hour, so we schedule it. That in turn is going to push it to the technician calendar, which is if you close the work order, there's a calendar right here where we'll see that tech, his color associated is yellow. He's assigned the color yellow. And of course, we can also clock the technician in. There's a time clock down in the bottom left down here. So there's a schedule, there's a technician, assignment, a time clock, and a scheduler. Three things down there in the bottom left of the work order. So if we do use a time clock, we can go ahead and clock in. Start the clock running, clock out. That's going to accumulate actual time. The actual hours are going to accumulate, and then in relation to the billable hours, we're going to compute an efficiency rating for that technician on the technician recap report. When we close the work order, go to the checkout window, and we can, of course, collect our money based on whatever it is we're ordering here. We've got some kind of item here. I have no idea what this was. Let's go ahead and put this in at 10,000. I don't know what that item was. It had a huge dollar amount associated with it. Let's put $550. We go ahead and we can go to the checkout window, collect our payment, and so forth, whatever money is due. There's one other small feature I want to show you, and then we're done for today. If you want to task it, there's a tasking column. Tasking is designed to give you the ability to create a work order that will print in sections. So each job will be broken down, and you'll be able to see exactly how much parts and labor were due for each task. Or here I've got a work order where we have 3 separate tasks, task 1, 2, and 3. Those tasks are created by highlighting the section that you want to add together, right-clicking and assigning a task. And the net result of that, when you go to print the work order, provided you have the tasking work order selected, is that you're going to get 3 separate sections with a subtotal for each job that you performed. So that's going to look like this, where you're going to get section 1, 2, and 3, as you can see here. So each one has a subtotal when the work order closes out, and you can see the total for parts, labor, and the subtotal. So I think we're on time, guys, for today. We don't like to go longer than 2 hours. I'm hoping that you guys had a number of your questions answered. I'm going to pause real quickly for questions, and then we'll wrap up. Anybody got questions that they needed answered? Okay, here's a question. Can you create a repair order invoice that goes against shop suppliers to keep track of tools you buy all year for the shop? Anything you do for the shop, you can have an invoice, obviously an internal invoice, and put tools or shop supplies on it if you inventory them, if you want to keep track of who, even right down to the level where you can track which technician took the tools. I mean, you could have an open invoice running on tools. The guy checks it out, you scan it, have a scan tag with it, put it on the invoice. Don't invoice it out, and then just when he returns it, you can remove it. So it goes in and out based on based on who has what. As far as shop supplies go, it depends. If you're inventorying all your shop supplies, then you'd want to use an internal. There's an internal sale code for that. There's a sale type here called internal. That internal sale type is also, or sales code is also used on the repair order when you want to do internal work orders. But I think we're at time here, so I think we're gonna wrap up and call it a day for today, guys. We'll pick this up again. Please email support@micsystems.com if you have any additional questions, and we'll be doing this again. Like I said, if you want a copy of today's training, we did cover a lot today. So if you do want a copy of that, just email support@micsystems.com and ask for a copy of March 14th's training, and we'll make sure that we email you a link for that. So appreciate your time. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right, take care, folks. Have a good day.
Bye.